Welcome to
Tamarindo Podcast.
Hosted by me, Brenda Gonzalez, a political nerd and nonprofit capacity builder.
And me, Ana Sheila Victorino, a queer well-being enthusiast and mindset coach. We are a Latinx empowerment podcast discussing politics, culture, and how to keep your calma with well-being practices and self-love.
Welcome to the show. Woo! On this episode, we focus on art as a tool for activism. We speak to Julio Salgado, a visual artist and the co-founder of DreamersAdrift and the Migrant Storytelling Manager for the Center for Cultural Power. His status as an undocumented queer artivist has fueled the contents of his artwork that calls attention to the migrant rights movement. Joining him is Marta Gonzalez, a Chicana artivist, musician, feminist, music theorist, and associate professor in the Intercollegiate Department of Chicana, Chicano, Latina, Latino Studies at Scripps Claremont College. She's a singer and songwriter and percussionist for the Grammy award-winning band Quetzal. This episode features music from Quetzal today. We hope you enjoy the episode.
What's up, Tamarindo amiguis? Welcome back. What's up, Brenda? ¿Cómo estás? ¿Qué onda?
Hello, listeners. I'm really excited, really happy about the weekend that I just had, and I want to give y'all just a quick suggestion of something fun you could do in Southern California. I was able to go to the Cheech, which is in Riverside, and it is an amazing collection of Chicano art from Cheech Marin. Awesome experience. And we were there in Riverside, as I've mentioned before. We were there for the Mucho Gusto Festival. It was so much fun. So a lot of tropical Latino music, all Latina folks from all over Latin America got together in Riverside, and I got to stay at the Mission Inn. It was just such a wonderful cultural experience. I also got to see Fabi Fav's amazing lowrider piñata. So if you all haven't made it out to the Cheech, I want to recommend that you do that. Now, Ana Sheila, ¿qué pasa contigo?
Yeah, I got to go there a month ago or so as well with my family and love the museum. So I echo y'all, get out there. I know it's the IE, but drive on a Saturday morning. Y'all can make it, no traffic. Definitely worth a visit. I love what he's done. So thank you for sharing that recommendation, Brenda. I also had a fun sort of random activity that I also want to recommend to folks. So I'm visiting my family this weekend, and we're doing a little exchange where we're getting a surprise person, like a white elephant, but we have to spend a max of $10. And so, y'all know it's hard to get stuff for $10 nowadays, but
especially now,
But I decided to go on a walk in my neighborhood. So I live in Boyle Heights, which is a neighborhood in East LA. And I walked all along Cesar Chavez, pretty much from the end where there isn't anything else going on past one end to the other end when there isn't much going on. But for a big stretch of that street, there's a lot of stuff to check out. So I just literally covered the whole street looking for, my gifts, but just letting myself walk into whatever store caught my eye. And it was just really fun because there wasn't a specific plan. I feel like a lot of times, especially in LA, we go to a specific spot. Maybe we go to the business next door, but we're not really letting ourselves explore like that. And I think it was so lovely because I got to see places that I hadn't noticed. And I've lived here for now 6 months. And just walking, I noticed stores that I had never seen, even though I've driven on the street so many times, right? But it's just so different when you're walking and when you just let yourself sort of play. And I almost got a limpia, which I'm going to get. Have you ever gotten a limpia before, Brenda?
Yes, I have actually at my house. We had a curandera come over, and my Hope Sisters from Hispanas Organized for Political Equality came in. It was super cool. So yeah, I have.
Yeah, I've done it before, but I haven't done it in many years. And I was like, maybe it's a day for a limpia. I didn't do it, but I'm going to go back. The main brujo wasn't there. So I'm gonna go back, but I ran into, I got some gifts, and then I ran into this bookstore that I also had never noticed. And the bookstore was awesome. And in the bookstore, I saw a postcard. They had vintage postcards, and I saw this postcard probably from the 70s of the university that my dad went to, which was when he was there. So he went to this university in Mexico City called, UNAM, and there is a picture of it. And I was like, and I bought it, and I'm actually writing him. My dad's birthday was a few days ago. And so I started writing him a postcard. So it was just a really sweet adventure to just walk down the street and without any like plan on where I was going to go. So recommend just kind of letting yourself have those kinds of dates where you just explore without a specific spot in mind. So that was really fun.
Beautiful. Yeah. Sounds like a lot of divine intervention on your walk. I highly recommend also walking in LA. Y'all, awesome recommendations. Okay, so shifting to what we have today. Today, we're going to talk to two artists that are using their talents and their platform to build community, and they are decolonizing the arts while doing it. But before we get into that, we want to share some announcements. If you are listening to this episode when it comes out, which is on Wednesday, you know that you still have time to join us on Thursday for Cultivating Financial Liberation, an in-person gathering in Highland Park happening on Thursday, October 5th. At 6:30 is when the program starts. Get there early, walk around York, just like Ana Sheila suggested. You will stumble into a lot of great things, and you will stumble into this bookstore called the Pop Hub, and that's where we'll be. And I'm so excited. We just added a special performance by Heidi Rojas, a first-generation Latina songwriter that is blowing up on TikTok. We will have some links for you all to check her out in the notes of this episode. Her lyrics are so amazing. Ana Sheila, I had a great opportunity to see her live recently with the fundraising event for our friend Dulce. I know you couldn't make it, but I'm so excited that you're going to get to see Heidi at this event. So y'all, please go to tamarindopodcast.com/event so that you can register. And what else do we have, Ana Sheila?
Well, I mean, another just reminder, if y'all have been thinking about how much you love this podcast, and we know you do, please take 2 to 3 minutes to rate and review Tamarindo and Smithsonian podcast. I know this is hard, y'all. And all you got to do is go to podcast, find our podcast, scroll down. And if you want, just rate us, even that. But if you feel inspired to review, we would love that. So here's a review we just received. It says, love this podcast. Refreshing perspective on important issues in the Latinx community. Feel like I'm part of a conversation with the older sisters I never had. Get cute.
Yes, calling us old and telling us we're awesome. I love it. I love it. So y'all, please take them a minute to write those notes. They seriously, that was 3 months. That just bought you all 3 months more of Tamarindo. I'm telling you, without those reviews, we're going to call quits. So please get us those reviews. All right. Before we hear from our guest, I also want to let listeners know that October 5th is not only the day of our financial empowerment event, but guess what? Look at like almost as if we planned it, which we actually didn't, but pretend that we did. It is also Latina Equal Pay Day. So a perfect time to have a conversation around financial empowerment. This means that October 5th is when the average Latina's earnings catches up to the average white man's earnings of 2022 of last year.
Yeah, y'all. So we invite you to join us in calling attention to this. In the notes of this episode, you'll see that we have linked a toolkit with all the resources you need to help us bring visibility to the Latina wage gap. Together, let's say Págame, this Latina Equal Pay Day.
Yep, absolutely. Latinas are paid just 52 cents on average for every dollar a white man is paid, resulting in a loss of pay amounting over $1 million over the course of 40 years. This pay gap harms Latinas, our families, our futures, and the entire country. We must get paid fairly and now, and that is why we're inviting you to please join us on this campaign. Again, the link to this is all in the notes of this podcast. All right, enough with the announcements, enough with the catching up. Let me tell you who we have today. We have Julio Salgado, a visual artist whose status as undocumented queer artivist has fueled the contents of his artwork that calls attention to the migrant rights movement. We also have Marta Gonzalez, a Chicana artivista, musician, feminist music theorist, and associate professor in the Intercollegiate Department of Chicana, Latina, Latino Studies at Scripps Claremont College. You'll hear how identity and place influences their work, their critique of the confines of creative spaces of the past, and how they're each working to make creatives of color have greater opportunities, mentorship, and liberty to create. I'm going to say that whole part over because it's a little bit of a mouthful. Here we go. You'll hear how identity and place influences their work, their critique of the confines of creative spaces of the past, and how they are each working to make creatives of color have greater opportunities, mentorship, and liberty to create. So Just a quick note that we had a lot of fun in this recording. You'll hear that Marta and Julio caught up and we're like, oh, I remember how I know you. So you'll hear a little bit of that. And you will also hear a lot of bangling because Marta had these gorgeous, gorgeous bangles. And I forgot how to podcast and tell her to take them off before we record. So if you hear some jingling, that's Marta talking with her hands. And that's more of an invitation for you to watch this episode on YouTube so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. All right, let's hear from them now. First, I want to welcome Julio and Marta, both of you, for welcome you to Tamarindo, and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, such a treat. So first off, I want each of you to tell us in your own words, what do you do and why do you do it? And I'll start with Marta.
Oh, okay. My name is Marta Gonzalez. I consider myself a Chicana artivista, and meaning that I am an artist by trade, training, and as part of my culture. I'm a singer, I'm a songwriter. But I also use my skill sets as a way to develop out processes in order to be able to bring community into these processes, these music experiences. And yeah, that's what artivista is for me.
Yeah, and what is your why? Why do you do what you do?
My why is I think that we have a lot of problems in community and in society nowadays. And part of the problem I see is how alienated we are from each other. But beginning with our own sense of creativity, with our own sense of creative expression. And so my goal is really to get people to connect to their creative selves and create those practices as community so that people can connect with each other, right? So the idea here is that I think that we have been so alienated from our own creative sense that we don't have those communal creative activities that connect us to each other. So it's sort of a way of trying to get people to be in community more often and be in community via creative practices.
Beautiful, beautiful. And so for Julio, how do you describe what you do and what is your why?
Yeah, thank you so much for having us again. And Marta, again, it's like such a pleasure to be in conversation here because yeah, like I my what I do is I'm a visual artist. I happen to be undocumented and queer, and those things have had a huge impact in the artwork that I put out for the past probably I started doing this whenever Facebook or MySpace back in the days. I used to post stuff on Facebook and MySpace and Tumblr, and so being able to reach a wider audience in this age of the technology has been really interesting, right? And so and why do I do it? I do it because I don't know what else to do. Like I think as an artist, there's no reasoning behind it. There's this feeling that of creativity that you just have to put out. There's almost like no shame. I feel from a young age, I've been just creating, and drawing was my first medium. Now, like, I venture into writing, and I was a journalism major in college. And so that really, it's really about putting our stories out there so that other people don't write those stories for us. And so that's why I do it.
Yeah, beautiful. Both of those answers really resonate, I'm sure, for our listeners. I also love how you said, Julio, that like, no shame, which I think is so brave. I think a lot of folks that are curious about exploring their creativity might be bogged down by, oh, what are people going to say? Is this good enough? So I think that's just so wonderful that for you, it's always been innate to express. And I'll stick with you, Julio, and then I'll come back to you, Marta. But I'd like to explore this a little further. How does your personal identity and where you grew up, place influence the work that you do?
I mean, completely. I think I grew up, I grew up here in Southern California. I was born in Ensenada, Mexico, arriba los cachanillas. And I came here when I was still developing, as a teenager, right? And so I had my Mexican influence. And then, when I was growing up in Mexico, also I was creative. I was a creative kid. I remember drawing. There was a contest in Ensenada to draw how you imagine your the local radio station, how they look like, because this is back before social media, and you just hear a voice. And I remember my dad took me. It was like El Día del Niño, like when they celebrate the little kids. And so, from a young age, my parents were very like they were, you pursue this, draw if you want. And so we come here, and I one of my first classes that I was enrolled in the seventh grade, I came here in the seventh grade, was an art class. And again, I was very pushed. I was in a Long Beach Unified School District where I went to school, is very pro arts. And so all of that really had a huge influence in me pursuing that. And so there's this stereotypes about immigrant parents wanting you to do like become a lawyer, become a doctor, which we need all of that. We need all doctors and lawyers. But art, it's like, oh, it's a hobby. It's not a real thing. It's not something that you can do. But my parents were really supportive. I'm actually writing a comic strip right now for the LA Times about that experience of growing up as an undocumented artist. And so I think the people around me were like, I was lucky to be encouraged, and to my creativity to be, I was encouraged.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And for you, Marta, how does place and how you grew up influence the music that you do? I know that, East LA is such an important part of what you study, what you lecture on, and where the music is influenced. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Oh man, first of all, Julio, we've met before. I just realized I'm looking at you at Harvard. Do you remember? Were you that?
Yes, it was for like a conference.
Yes, it was for it was about yes, a conference that I can't believe I don't remember his name right now. Anyhow, we met.
It's all about building community. See, you're doing it right here.
I know your face, so I'm like, have we met? Or like, it's just like I've seen your face so many times.
And then that's all your beautiful artwork in the back, right?
Yes, yeah.
Yes, exactly. I remember I took some posters and like I anyhow, we've met before. It was really quick. You were on your way somewhere else. We were all in one room at some point, and then yeah, so we gave a talk and a workshop, and then we saw each other briefly, and then that was it. But I remember now. Oh my goodness. I knew that the name reminded me, but anyhow, but I just want to say I love your work. I just want to say that. As far as, my upbringing, same idea. My parents are immigrant parents. I was actually born here in East LA, Boyle Heights, and music was always just part of our culture in the house, singing. Unfortunately, my dad really had a different sense of what a life in music was, and that was to professionalize, right? And so I think that there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's important, but I don't think we should put all our values just in that, right? That I think that, and Julio doesn't do this either, right? Of course, you want to make a living, you want to do this work, but you're also very mindful and keeping your ear to the ground in community, what's important, what value systems we can gather from that. And so one of the things that my dad raised us to think about is like, he wanted us to be professional singers and kind of pushed us. And there's this whole way of going into music that's very exploitative, oftentimes for women, et cetera, et cetera. And so those things, early on really soured my idea of what music could be in community, right? Or what music could be in your life in general, where the only way to exist through art and music practice is through the market economy, right? To capitalism, right? It's like, if you don't make any money, then you're not an artist, right? And you shouldn't focus on that unless you're going to make some real money. And in my case, I had a lot of community experiences, especially here in East LA, with artist activists at the time that were really thinking about art and music in as tools of social justice. And then with art studying and the Sun Zapatista movement that happened in 1994, all the writings that came out and all the studying, our travels to Chiapas and back, and really getting to know that movement that made us think about, okay, that's important. Tenemos que comer, right? We have to do that. But there's also this other sort of charge that we had, especially as artists in the 90s, that began to think about like other ways of thinking about music, art, and culture, right? That it didn't always have to be commodity based, that it could also be something else. And so that whole movement really changed the way I think about art, music, and culture. It really helped me unlearn what my dad had taught us, that it was just about that. Y es más, él se murió. Do your speakers speak Spanish at all? Sorry.
Oh yeah, our listeners are us.
Okay,
you are our listeners.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Sometimes, I start going back and forth and then I forget. So it really made us, my dad really died with this like longing to be a professional musician, famous, making money musician type thing. But a certain idea of what it means to be a success, right? And so watching him sufrir eso, right? Like not being able to reach that kind of idea was just sort of like distorting about what I realized music was. And that is that it fills you, that it's something that you could do with others in community. It's not just something you do on stage. And of course, in my career, I do it on stage, and I've recorded many albums, and I've done this thing with music, but I also make time, or have also really spent time trying to craft this other side of what music can be as well, because I think it's also important. And it was also a very important part of all of our cultures, so many cultures around the world, that music is participatory, that music is part of community and everyday life, and it doesn't always have to be commoditized. And that's something that I think is a way of decolonizing our minds, and something that has always been a part of, something I started to learn in East LA grassroots organizing networks here, from artists and activists that were really deep into the Zapatista movement and some of the value systems that they were communicating.
Yeah, no, thank you. And the reason why I wanted to speak to each of you is because I do see that intersection of art and activism in the work that each of you do. So I want to go now to Julio and speak a little bit. You've touched on it a little bit, but speak a little bit more on how your work has been so, it's so visible, it's so colorful and joyful, and why we need joy, especially as we think about the fight for immigrant integration, or immigrant inclusion, I should say. It's a hard fight to be in, because it's been so not good. The progress has been so slow. I want to talk about the role of joy in your work, and whether or not the art that you do, if you find it healing, or tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I listening to you, Marta, I think you had this influence from your father, right? Who had an idea of what art was supposed to be, or where you were supposed to take art with. That was a similar experience that I had in college. My first semester was at Long Beach City College, and from I mentioned earlier, my teenage years, and my family, especially my mom, who was like very "Simijo, hazle, dude, you can draw." And then I get to this institution, and I hated it. I hated art. Like the first 2 semesters that I was an art major, it felt very I was used to like art being my expression, and my way of like letting it all, putting it all out, on a piece of paper. And I remember specifically an art class that I took. It was a drawing. It was the summer of 2001. It was my first semester. I was still 17, and we had to do this self-portraits. And I remember feeling just very angsty, and like very Like I didn't know if college was my thing because I was undocumented. And I remember drawing myself very, like the bottom part of my body, like melting, expression. And, we had to do this, a critique, like student critique of each other's work. And I remember the professor was like, look at Julio's work. And everybody comes over to my piece. And, I'm about to be like, oh my God, they're going to love my work, blah, blah, whatever. The teacher, like, she was like, rips me up and like says like, this is what happens when you're trying to show off and you don't follow the instructions. There were instructions. It was like a grid image, where you should like, you take a photograph and there's like a grid and you're supposed to, that was the assignment. But I was like, this is art. We're supposed to like express yourself. And I felt so little and so like, like, oh my God, I gotta follow the rules. I was so confused. Again, I'm still developing as my voice is still developed. And so I was like, I don't like this. I'm paying somebody to tell me that I suck or, was critiquing. Looking back, perhaps he was trying to, I don't know, teach me the skill, whatever. But I just feel that the way that art, a lot of I have friends who went to art school and they're so good, but they're so like, they're so, I don't know, there's something that art school, there's something that art school, film school does that too, where they cage you, I don't know. And so I moved to, I changed my major to journalism, where in journalism it's all about telling a story. It's all about, I started as a political cartoonist, and it was all about get the point out, put it out there. And so that was my more creative side and where I felt more free to really speak up. And, then I graduated college, and then all of a sudden I see that all these undocumented students are coming out of the shadows and saying that they're undocumented and unafraid. And I knew that like this telling of the story, capturing the story, like I had to do it, right? Like, and I was part of this community. And so I think for me, it's all about, again, going back to, it's about collaboration. I would ask them like, can I draw this? Do you like this? It was a back and forth. And so I'm hoping that the art school system is changing a little bit. I was having a conversation with a professor at Pasadena City College, and I shared this story, and they were like, we definitely are in an era where, like the teaching, it's becoming a little less like
rigid.
Like rigid. It's like, no, let them speak. Let's have arguments. That's the point of school. But like to make somebody feel little is so, I think it's so dirty, which I didn't have that experience in journalism school. And I don't know if it's like just like art school, film school,
music schools, they're all like that. In many ways, it's, right, they invest in the discipline, right? And there's a discipline, right? And so he was trying to discipline you and try to make you an example of what everybody should be doing, right? And that's how they begin to box you in, right? This idea, it's same idea, what I was talking about, how music is a certain way, and this is how we experience music, and people that come along and challenge that get disciplined, right? And so that's what he tried to do to you. And I'm glad he didn't manage to do that, because otherwise we wouldn't have your beautiful artwork, right? That happens a lot. It's all over. And that's part of how they compartmentalize art, even art itself, right? How, disciplines, there's dance and then there's music, right? Disciplines. But honestly, so many cultures around the world they go hand in hand. Music and dance go together. And that's when I was studying at UCLA in ethnomusicology program, that's the first thing I realized. I was like, wow, when they teach this, it's like, oh yeah, we don't separate these things. These things go together. And I remember thinking, wow, this is dope. I like this. That part I did like about music. There was all this other part on theory and all these things. We had to learn the Western way of talking about world music, which is totally warped in and of itself. But like, that's kind of like, it's everywhere. And that's part of capitalist framework, right? Like, you have to learn this way. And we have to see that you learn this before you can move on to anything else, rather than like commending you and being like, this is beautiful. this is how you see yourself. You're working within the grid, but then from here down you are, right? Rather than seeing the potential and the beauty of what you did, they critique it because it doesn't fit the box.
Yeah.
Yeah. And are you all, both of you as artists, I mean, you've been in this game for a long time. Have you seen an evolution of that? Is there a breaking away from that rigidity and into some more like decolonization of the way art is? What is your, kind of like you have this span of time. How do you see things now? Are you hopeful at all in the way the art world is evolving and changing? Of course, I think one of the other things that I'm excited to speak to both of you about is that like, you're both BIPOC artists. What does it mean to be a person of color in the art world? And what have you seen? What is there left to do?
Well, I in my field, I teach in the Intercollegiate Chicano Latino Studies department, right? With a focus on gender studies, right? My PhD's in gender studies. And so some of the work and the department that I'm in is in the Chicano Latino Studies department. And so that field is filled with people that are challenging art, music, and culture, the Western disciplines in all of these beautiful ways, right? We have so many artists, installation artists, visual artists, mural artists, that are doing this wonderful work. So the challenges are there. And I have the great joy of being able to teach that to my students, introducing them to different artists over the years, poets, dancers, singers. We look at the work, we look at the people that write about their work and analyze the work as well, right? All of these things so that they can see the depth of it, how much depth there is, and also so that they can recognize how Western culture and Western art museums don't always include work like Julio's, right? Or like other artists that we have out there, right? And why, right? These Western ideals, these Western paradigms don't often recognize us or see it as art or as beautiful, right? Or as rigorous, or you know what I mean? They have these words, these euphemisms to describe, to hide their racism, right? And so it's up to us and interpreters like us and practitioners like us to go in and continue to challenge it, right? So it's not just about, for me as a college professor, as a producer of art and music, I think it's important that I fucking keep my shit real, right? Keep
Yes.
putting out the stuff that I think is important and that I see and reflecting my community and my music. But then as a teacher, I think it's important that I introduce our students to the kinds of art that's out there, all the history, the trajectory and body of work of people of color over the course of history here in Mexico, here in the US, all over Latin America, but then also show them how all the different ways that we continue to be excluded, right? That we still have a lot of work to do to break down those barriers or create houses for ourselves. We're so close to the Cheech now, right? And there's so much beautiful work going on at the Cheech that just centers Chicano art and culture and processes as well. They're really trying to challenge themselves. And so those kinds of spaces and other kinds of work and ongoing meetings with artists such as Julio and other artists that I know of, is part of what gives me hope that I think we're still working at it. There's a lot to be done, and there's a lot that has been done, but there's also, we know that, white supremacy keeps coming at us in all these different ways, and we need to stay ahead of the curve.
Yeah. So Julio, what have you seen? What are you hopeful in the way that folks like you are breaking barriers?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me it's definitely looking back at the work that has come before us, and the collaboration with the new generations of artists. Like it's not, and as Martha mentioned, it's not just, it's who's in charge now of these institutions, right? I think that the curators of color, I think, make a huge difference. Who is putting what together, who is highlighting, the work that is not seen traditional in the art world. I'll give again an example. I think examples are work best for me, but in my own experience, I remember a couple of years ago, I got hit up by, Claudia Zapata, who was the curator at the Smithsonian, and they were putting together this show. Carmen, I'm forgetting her last name, Carmen Ramos. One of the, she was putting this show together about the Chicano art, from the 60s, 70s, and to the new media. And I was considered new media because a lot of my work is digital. And Claudia made a point. She was like, media right now, the way that, digital artwork that you're putting out into the world, institutions, they don't know what to do with it because it's not something that you can touch or steal or take from you. And so, but the way that, if it wasn't for Claudia and Carmen who pushed to have me to be part of this work, and other artists that are work in the digital realm, it's because of them, right? And so more of that. I'm so happy to see more of that. Like, museums are doing that. The social media, like, I think new generation of artists are relying on, are not relying anymore on the physical spaces to put. You don't need to ask permission anymore, right? You're just like sharing out into the world. And I see this amazing work that it's just it blows my mind of how we're technology can be very scary, especially right now. We can get into this conversation about AI and what that's doing to our artists. But I think like any space could be dangerous, but any space can also be a place of for us to flourish. And within our communities as BIPOC artists, we'll figure out, even back then. One of my favorite movements that I always kind of look back is like during the Riot Girl movement, when they had like all the scenes like in the 90s. It was very white women led, but it's just there was a lot of women of color there who were pushing back and using those resources. So I love looking back at what folks in the past did and how we can mix them with what we're doing now. And yeah, the past can be problematic. The past made a lot of mistakes. But I do believe we're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. Like artists, as long as, it's not like, affecting people's lives in a horrible way. Like, I think that it's important to look at the mistakes of the past and make our own mistakes. I think it's important as artists to be allowed to make mistakes and to be able to put out bad work. Like, we also should be allowed to make our bad artwork, because in order to make good work, you need to put out the bad. And so I just, again, think about how many white artists are allowed to make mediocre work, and, they learn and they move on and they make better work. And so I think that we should also give ourselves that opportunity and support each other. I think that's another thing that I constantly think about. It's another sort of danger of putting your stuff online, is that anybody has access to it, and anybody can interpret the work that you put out there in the way that it's harder to defend or harder to give context if we're not having this conversation. But yeah, like, like let your creativity flow, and again, go back to what our ancestors or the people in the past have done for us to get here. And yeah, just more of that. And I'm excited that people are just creating, and we're not asking permission anymore. That's another thing. I love the fact that we're doing this whether you like it or not.
I love it. Unapologetic.
Yeah.
Yeah, sin vergüenza and sin pedir permiso. I love it. So to conclude, I'd love for each of you to just listen. Our listeners are out there; they're listening. Many of them might be artists, so I'm sure this is resonating with them. But those of us that are like me, that are we appreciate art. What would be one thing that our listeners need to know about supporting artists right now, artists of color and artists like you? So Marta, what would be the one thing you would like our listeners to take away?
Well, I think supporting, right? If you can buy a piece, if you can be a part of their support in any way, I think you should do that, right? many people don't know that the great artists of the past, okay, let's, for lack of a better example, let's talk about Mozart, right? I know that sounds funny, even though that's not the kind of music I play. But it's really interesting to find out about. My son is a classical musician. Well, he studied that, but that's not what he dedicates his life to. But he is really funny. He knows a lot of history of all kinds of those guys like Vivaldi and other folks, right? These are classical musicians, old school. And he talks about how everybody had a, como se, like a padrino, you know, like a somebody who would basically like believed in them and said like keep doing your work, y les daban dinero, les proveían, you know, resources. Si no era dinero, era resources, comida, regalos, cosas así, you know, like I feel, and more when I meet a young artist, when I see somebody that's so passionate about what they're doing and that want to dedicate that kind of time, I don't critique that at all. It's funny because I just want to make this clear. Okay, so when I talk about the participatory stuff that we do and all that, that's important. That doesn't mean I stop doing the professional work that I do, right? The songwriting and the ongoing recordings that I've, like, eso también is important, but there's a market system for that, right? That's already set. I'm talking developing out another way of thinking about music, art, and culture. Okay, so that aside, whenever I see an artist that's trying to do that other thing and like really, I'm like, hell yeah. Like if I see that they're ongoing, they're working and I mean, most of the times you see it now on Instagram, but even if I see an artist in a coffee shop or something, a songwriter, I'm like, qué bonitas canciones, I try to find out. I actually, you know, have funded some things before. I've helped, you know, if si me sobra algo, you know, I give to those people that I know that need something or I write letters, right? In my capacity, I'm able to write letters. I'm able to recommend people for grants or whatever. And so that's kind of support the artists, support the beautiful work that they do, and support each other, you know, go to each other's shows, you know, buy each other's work, you know, give them away as gifts, things like that, you know.
Yeah, that's a great one. And Julio, what would be one of the recommendations you have for our listeners on how they could support artists like you?
Yeah, I mean, if you're an artist who or somebody who supports artists, I mean, yeah, I second everything that Marta said. I think, you know, going back to this world of technology and social media, it's so easy to, oh, this image is cute. Let me scroll down and like, or you'll share something without crediting an artist. Like crediting artists is so important, because there's so much out there that, you know, people don't really think about who's behind the images, right? And so doing that, I think, yeah, I think another way of for artists who are looking, yeah, you know, like grants and all that stuff. It's really hard to, you know, we get very, you know, whenever I'm applying for grants or, you know, looking at applications, I get so like, there's, what do I, you know, you get
They're overwhelming, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
As part of one of my, you know, day jobs, I'm part of the Center for Cultural Power, plug-in here. And one of the things that we do is like think about how we are making these applications and who gets to apply, right? As somebody who's undocumented, a lot of times I didn't apply for scholarships or funds because I didn't have a social. And so how there's systems that are already, yeah, being, you know, that are in place, but how can we disrupt that? And I'm actually wearing a shirt of one of the programs that I run called the Disruptors. And, you know, I co-created this program for folks who want to write for TV. You know, it's another form of telling a story, right? And so one of the things that we do is like, let's create funds and give folks like, here's some money so you can like live for like at least 3 months. And, you know, we hook them up with mentorship. I think mentorship is a huge thing in this field. If you're an artist who, you know, you see somebody's work, if you see Marta's work, if you see my work and you're inspired, hit us up. You'll be, you know, surprised how many people are accessible to that. I had mentors, you know, people like Lalo Alcaraz, Fabiana Rodriguez, who started the Center for Cultural Power. You know, I remember hitting her up and when I was in college, and now she's my boss. And so like, people don't stalk people and don't like overwhelm, you know, people, but like send a message and you'll be surprised how many folks want to share back. I want to share back all the things that I've learned, because we can gatekeep all this knowledge, you know, and of course it'd be exhausting to like constantly giving, you know, like this is what I do all the time, but reach out to folks who are doing similar work that you're doing, and people will help you and support. Yeah, support and credit the artist and pay the artist. If you're somebody who works at an organization or whatever, and you're reaching out to artists because you like their work, don't ask people to do stuff for free. If you're getting paid and you're reaching out for an artist to work on something, really think about what you're asking for this artist, right? Like, because we think of our work as something, pero ya lo haces, te gusta. It's like there's a lot of work that comes behind it, right? And so I wish I could pay my rent with a poster, but that's not the reality. The reality is we live in a capitalistic, nasty ass society. And while that is being worked out, we need to pay, you know, we need to live. And so I think it's important to think about artists' livelihood, because a lot of artists of our past have died broke, you know, and we think of them, you know, now after they're dead. It's like, don't love your artists after they're dead. Like, respect them when they're alive.
Yeah, give them their flowers and their money now. All right. Well, thank you both so much for all of the information and knowledge that you have gifted us today. I think our listeners have a lot to absorb here, whether they're artists, whether they support the arts, and just hearing from each of you the way that the art world has done better and can do better, and the work left to do. So just I want to thank you both for your time. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. That was a fantastic conversation. Lots to unpack there, especially for all our listeners that might be artists. You now know that here's a couple of people that you can reach out to get that mentorship, get that support. And shout out to places like the Cheech that are making our art more accessible. So with that, Ana Sheila, time to close out this episode. So why don't we hear your matraca first?
Matraca. So I'm actually going to do two really quick. My first matraca is actually my shirt that I found at a cool market, and I'll link the market in the notes. I forgot the name right now, but y'all probably can't read it, but it says, "All my friends are hoes, honest, optimistic, empathetic souls." So I saw this shirt and I absolutely loved it. So I picked it up. So I'm loving that. And then my other matraca is I really like the fact that people can customize, you know, the black license plates that people can customize. I just love seeing what people choose to put on their license plates. And I'm like, I want to know the types of people that do this, because y'all seem like you just like to have fun with life and don't take it too seriously. But yesterday I saw one that said, "Te boté," which made me laugh out loud. And then I immediately had to play the song "Te boté." So that was fun. Yeah, so that's my matracas.
Cool. I used to have a yellow beetle, and I had a personalized plate. It said banana bug, and then the little plate around it, it said made in Mexico, and so was I. So that was my personal plate. I had one of those really adorable, super cute, new at the time beetles. It was so fun.
That's
all right, so let's move on to your basura.
My basura this week is men policing other men for what they choose to wear. I saw this specifically. I was on Richard Cabral's Instagram page. If y'all are not familiar with him, he is an actor. He also opened up a coffee shop called Depict Coffee that I finally got to visit in Pasadena. He's formerly incarcerated, and he opened up this bookshop with someone else that was formerly incarcerated. So I finally got to go. And so I was checking out his Instagram page, and like in a post where he was talking about some community work that him and his co-founder were doing, he was wearing a satchel. And so there were comments about his purse, many comments about his purse from other men. And it was just really sad to see. And I normally don't engage in comments. I don't write comments, but to that guy, one of the men who was like, "Oh, you carry a purse now," or something like that, I was like, what did I say? Something about how these men are like doing this great community work, and that's what you choose to focus on. Like, that was my question mark to this guy. He didn't respond, but it's just really sad how men feel this like they need to police other men and their masculinity. And it's just like sad to see that it's still happening, that we can't just wear what we want without people needing to have some issue with it. So it was just frustrating to see that like on a post about like community work that this man is doing, so
Yeah, like nada que ver. Like you don't even go here, and never does that go here. Policing
Yeah,
masculinity, basura, basura, basura. And how are you countering that, Ana Sheila? What is your calma?
my calma, so this has been something I've been working on that I feel really proud of because it's a it's not easy work. So I've been looking at my relationships. So for folks that are watching us on video and folks that are not, sort of like think about like you're holding an apple, so kind of like a fist, like an open fist. And then just being so not too tight, right? Not controlling, not feeling so attached that you can't let go, but a sort of an open fist, and that can kind of open and close depending on many things. And I've been looking at my relationships, and what I mean by that is like I'm just letting my relationships naturally flow. I want to have the best environment for me and the best people that help me be that, and I want to be that for other people. And so how that's like manifested in my relationships is like just understanding that like sometimes you are not for somebody in that time, right? Like someone, if you're reaching out to somebody and they're not getting back to you in the same way, or you are asking for care in a certain way and they can't give that back to you, like understanding that you might not be part of what that person needs in that moment, and that is okay. And that like if I really love somebody and if I still care for somebody and they didn't do some fucked up shit, like I want them, like if I'm not the person that is creating the best environment, I want them to be in the healthiest environment. If I'm not for them in that moment, that is okay. And what that means sometimes is that like, of course that hurts, right? So like that means if someone can't reciprocate how you want to be cared for or how you want them to show up for you, then you get to make the decision that you get to let go a little bit. And then if they come back at a later time, you get to also make the decision about whether you want to let them in and to what degree, because ultimately you need to take care of what you need first. And so it's been really beautiful, and it's just been beautiful to be able to look at my relationships like that and be able to let go and let things flow and just know that we're all just trying to create the best environments for each other. And that's what I want for myself, and that's what I want for the people that I love. So it's been cool, the transition from like needing to feel so attached and needing for things to be a certain way to just letting the things be like what they're supposed to be. So that's my comment.
I love that. And just to help me further with the analogy, are you saying that the loose hand makes it so that you're not so confined or loose?
Yeah, exactly. So kind of having the loose. So like sometimes that means that a certain relationship, it gets to be never being a tight fist, because you never want to be so attached to a relationship that you are obsessive, controlling, etc. So kind of like an open fist, but that sometimes those relationships in their natural flow, maybe they're a little bit tighter, or maybe you have to like kind of let go, like open up the fist a little bit more, depending on where you are in the flow of your relationship. So that's kind of how I've been thinking about it.
I love visual analogies. Thank you for that. Great. Yeah. All right. Well, always here with the wisdom on the calmas, Ana Sheila. So I'll give it to you to ask me.
Yeah. So what's it? Let's get started with, what's your matraca?
Let's see. I don't even remember what I wrote. Oh, here it is. I love to read. Turns out I love to read. I have been reading Crux by Jean Guerrero. It is a phenomenal read. It is just fascinating. I guess it would be a memoir, but it also kind of reads like a mystery. It also reads like I guess it is a memoir, but it's all about her journey of trying to connect with her absent father and his challenges with addiction, with mental health, and the trauma of the way he grew up. It is just such a fascinating read. So if you all haven't picked up Jean Guerrero's book, Crux, shout out to that book. I highly recommend it. So that is my matraca.
I love that, Brenda. Maybe that'll be less next on my list. What about your basura, Brenda?
My basura is the case of Raquel Lopez Aguilar. This is a gentleman, although the name is Raquel, but I double checked that is his name. He is a 41-year-old father of two who's been arrested by Florida's SB 1718. And he is undocumented and was arrested and charged with human trafficking because the folks in his vehicle were also undocumented. And this has been leveled up, this sort of driving while undocumented under SB 1718 has been elevated into a felony of 15 years, and he's getting charged for each count. So this man could potentially spend the rest of his life in jail for simply driving to work with tinted windows. This is the garbage that's coming out of Florida. And we've sort of taken a break from getting really into these sort of heavy topics because it is exhausting. But I wanted to bring it back and let us just pause for a moment, because these sorts of instances, these cases are really fueling the other side. They want this to happen nationally. They want to put away human beings for just existing. So just a big garbage to this law. If there is a little bit of hope, there's the Mexican government is getting involved. They're calling out this law as racist, and they are paying for Raquel Lopez Aguilar's legal fees. And we all have to just be hopeful that it's going to have a positive outcome. The Mexican government seems optimistic, but we have to be on alert and know that too many human beings, this is again a father of two, have to live in terror just for trying to earn a living in this country. And so just a reminder that just because we don't talk about that, it's not that it's not happening, and we all gotta stay on alert.
Yeah, it's really heartbreaking. Hard to hear, hard to read, but like you said, it's important that we're aware of what's going on. And how about your comment, Brenda? What is keeping you grounded this week?
I know, well, it's hard to stay grounded after that, but on that note, I want to let you all know that one of the things I picked up at Mucho Gusto is this gorgeous branded mug here on a Shayla Inspiration, because I know we've been pretending that we were going to one day launch a mug. They did it. They actually did it. And
That's
cute.
I like the yellow. I like the yellow interior.
Yes, we could steal this. I know exactly which one they have because it was among the ones that we've been looking at. And all they did is just write Mucho Gusto, and it's so colorful and happy. And so this mug with my té instead of coffee is what's giving me calma. And with that, we just want to say, y'all, thank you again for listening. It's always such a pleasure to be in your ears. We might take a little bit of self-love breaks because it's Hispanic Heritage Month and we are busy. We are busy. But if you like this show, please share this episode with a friend. As we already said earlier, please write us a Apple Podcast review. If you're watching this on YouTube, write a comment, share it. We really appreciate everything that you're able to do to bring more ears to this podcast, because we work so hard on it and we just love the community that is behind it. So shout out to all of you for still being here. Shout out to you, Ana Sheila, for joining this episode. And y'all, see you next time. Ponte un suéter.
Thank y'all. Abrazos, besos. Ciao.
Ciao. Tamarindo Podcast is Brenda Gonzalez and Ana Sheila Victorino, with production support from Josie Melendez and Augusto Martinez Delgado of Sonoro Media. Our theme song is by Jeff Ricards. If you like our show, please rate and review Tamarindo Podcast or share an episode with a friend.